Welcome back to the Squint Podcast. It's a good thing you're here today because we have an extremely distinguished guest. His name is Dr. Michael Hamblin, world-renowned scientist and photobiomodulation expert. What does that mean? It means that when it comes to understanding light, specifically the benefits of red and infrared light, Michael is the best in the world. That's not an exaggeration. In fact, Dr. Hamblin is the world's authority on photobiomodulation. Is that hyperbole? You be the judge. Michael was an associate professor of dermatology at Harvard Medical School for 25 years. He is editor-in-chief of Photobiomodulation, Photomedicine, and Laser Surgery. He has published over 850 peer-review articles on the subject of photobiomodulation. He holds 10 patents. He has authored and edited more than 40 textbooks on photodynamic therapy, photomedicine, and nanomedicine. In fact, when people talk about red and infrared light, they mention Mike. He has over 120,000 citations. That means when people are talking about light, they mention Mike. He's that good, and he's here on the Squint Podcast. Dr. Hamblin, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for the introduction and the invitation.
Wonderful. So many of our listeners are beginners, and even a definition of photobiomodulation would be helpful in how you came to that name and all the leaders in the field. Why did they come to that name?
Okay, so what we know today is photobiomodulation probably mainly started off in the 1960s with the discovery of the laser. That's not strictly true because before then there were electric light baths and heliotherapy clinics and all sorts of ways of shining light on the human body. But as we know it today, it probably started off with what was called low-level laser therapy. Back in the days after discovery of the laser in 1960. And for maybe 20, 30 years, people thought there was something magic about lasers. They thought that laser light was different from regular light and it could do wonderful things. Probably because the discovery of LEDs, light-emitting diodes, which are much cheaper than lasers, much more accessible, they don't have any safety risks. They have kind of taken over from laser therapy. There's still a lot of debate about, what are there any differences between laser therapy and LED therapy? And maybe they are, maybe there aren't. But LEDs are now almost ubiquitous. There's still a few laser therapists that insist on using one of their sort of stock of lasers. It's more like an art form. But LEDs are widely available on the internet, hundreds and probably thousands of devices out there, and people get confused about what's the best device to buy.
And that's why we're here, because I have a lot of people asking me that very question. And because of the accessibility of these lights, people are asking questions, and I am so happy to have you on the show to explain a little bit more about, not necessarily the specifics of individual lights, but light as a modality for healing and medicine. So I'd love to just dive in because, like many people, I'm concerned about neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia. It kind of, I get panicked that, oh, is this going to happen to me? And I know that you've seen, so many applications of light therapy in helping with things, not only just longer term neurodegenerative disease, but, acute traumatic brain injury, as well as psychiatric disorders. Can you walk us through kind of beginning with traumatic brain injuries? We're in the United States, we're in the land of the NFL and football players, experiencing concussions and TBIs all the time. What does your research show in helping these problems?
Right. Well, research is quite often done in animal models, but The thing about light is harmless, especially as I say, LEDs and not lasers. So it's relatively easy to do human research with LEDs. The FDA has said that LEDs are non-significant risk devices, so you can't do any damage with them. Um, they've approved them for a lot of general wellness applications. Um, in terms of using them to treat sort of recognized diseases and conditions, that's slightly trickier because the FDA wants to have proof of efficacy. Proof of safety is not really needed, but they do want proof of efficacy. Um, you know, the two broad things about LED therapy. You can buy a device and you can use it at home. And if you're interested in the brain, you can get LED helmets. There's a lot of them on the market now. They're generally a mixture of red and near infrared LEDs. Um, you can wear them on your head. I would suggest maybe 15 minutes a day, even twice a day. You're not going to do any damage. It will help the general function of your brain. So if you're just worried about general brain health, you get old, you're forgetting things, your sleep is not too good, your mood is not too good, then you can just go ahead and order an LED helmet and wear it at home. If you have a recognized condition, such as a chronic traumatic brain injury or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, or a serious psychiatric problem, major depression, so forth, then photobiomodulation will help. The problem is that the people that treat these disorders have had not really any experience of using LED therapy. So if you are being treated for a brain disorder, you're very unlikely to be recommended to get an LED helmet. Although you can just order one. I mean, there's no problem. It's not going to do you any harm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in order to take advantage of the undoubted benefits, you need more, I guess, proper controlled clinical trials, which are very expensive. They cost millions of dollars. So the companies that make these devices don't have the funds to run big clinical trials, which is a shame, but that's the way it is. And a lot of people that buy a helmet and say it works wonders for them, well, that's fine, but that doesn't convince other people.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really have the outreach to sort of publicize their own personal story. I imagine that podcasts like yours will help to widen the news about benefits of photobiomodulation, but it's going to be a slow process. It's not going to happen anytime soon. I think your sound is off.
Sorry. What are you seeing specifically in the studies? I mean, in a very specific example. I mean, the horror of everybody is to walk into their mother or father and they can't remember their name. But what specific examples are you seeing in light therapy that are changing that people could understand?
Yeah, I mean, there have been clinical trials with dementia and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and in general, they're positive. There's never any downside. You could say that the benefits are, sometimes they're quite significant benefits, sometimes they're less significant benefits, but generally, all the trials do find benefits. If, as you say, you've got an elderly relative who's suffering mental decline, the story is you probably should have started with a photobiomodulation helmet years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It's, as I say, it's easy to order one. You probably only need to use it for 15 minutes a day. Nowadays, they had rechargeable batteries, so you can sort of walk around wearing your helmet. You can do other things. They're very easy to use. You don't have to sit there tethered with a cable to something.
And what about for psychiatric diseases? We have a large opioid crisis in this country. So what I had read, and something that you had said before was that there's two issues, which is one, detoxifying the body from whatever addiction that may be afflicting you, but then rewiring the pathways. So is that what the light does? It actually rewires your brain pathways so that you actually don't have the addiction anymore.
I believe that's the case, yeah. So as you correctly point out, addiction is a problem of miswiring in the brain. So you start off taking some kind of drug, like an opioid, for instance, you get a buzz out of it. So you think, this is really good. I need to do this again. But after a relatively few times, you start to change the brain pathways. And that's why, if you are addicted to opioids, even though you've, as you say, been to detox clinics, so you're not suffering physical withdrawal symptoms, you still have overpowering urges, which has been well known, and these will last for years. So this is the key thing. You need to rewire the brain to try and get rid of these urges.
Interesting, interesting. And what applications? I know it seems from all the research that I've read that the most extensive research in photobiomodulation is being done in cancer, but more particularly in the effects of cancer treatment. So treating people with, chemotherapy-induced hair loss and cognitive dysfunction. What are the studies there? How many have there been? And why? I had a friend the other day, and he is suffering from cancer, and he's really needing to ask. It's not a modality that they say, here you go. We have all these studies on photobiomodulation. We have over 6,000 studies, in fact. That seems like a mountain of evidence. Doesn't that seem like a mountain of evidence?
Oh, it's a lot more than 6,000.
So how many is it? I mean, we have so much
Well, I would think well over 20,000. I mean, it's
okay. And you're 850 of those, which is pretty incredible. So what's stopping hospitals? What is stopping the people that we're going to who are supposed to have the answers? Why are they not introducing us to something that has such a prolific amount of research on it?
because there's nobody that has the funds to do the trials. That's the you see, evidence-based medicine is ingrained in hospitals and standard medical procedure now. So nobody in a hospital or a proper physician will ever do something which is not evidence-based medicine. I mean, they just won't do it.
Mhm.
There's alternative and complementary medicine. Yes, that's fine. They do all these sort of things.
Mhm.
But mainstream medicine insists everything has to be evidence-based. In order to be evidence-based, you have to run big randomized controlled trials, which takes millions, tens of millions of dollars. And the companies that make the devices simply do not have the funds to run these trials.
But the pharmaceutical companies have the funds to run the trials on the
Right, but
pharmaceutical.
they're not going to put themselves out of business. I mean,
Right.
the big thing about suppose you make a LED light device, it costs $1,000 maybe. Um, okay, you sell that and you're done, right? I mean, if it's well built, it'll last for months, years. It's not going to wear out. So for big companies, there's a limited income with LED devices.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, when they had laser therapists, the laser therapists could charge by the treatment because you had to go to somebody's office, sit there, and have a laser shot on you. So that was their business model. But now we're in LEDs, you don't need somebody to shine an LED on you. You just get one and you use it.
Right. So,
Um,
so does this mean that the future of medicine is just going to be this more decentralized and people are going to find their own solutions and do their own research?
well, I mean, they're not going to do their own research. I mean, if
Right.
you read enough, there's enough out there. And as I say, the cost of getting a device is, at the most, it's maybe 1 or 2 thousand. There's many devices you can get for a few hundred that are worth getting.
Mhm.
Um,
I
I
just,
mean,
okay,
it's difficult. It's really just a matter of publicity and education, really. Once you tell people, they'll go and do it.
right. So it's interesting. So much of the research is, cancer related and side effects from cancer. But I think where the topic or the conversation is happening is, of course, where what people are thinking about. They're thinking about fat loss and anti-aging for skin and athletic performance and all these things that kind of affect them more on the day to day.
Hair regrowth, that's always a big seller.
Right. So, can you
Uh,
explain just even for anti-aging, because I have a lot of women that are watching this and they all are on Amazon, they're all buying these lights. So, what is photobiomodulation actually doing? Is it building collagen? What is happening in the skin at the mitochondrial level?
I mean, the skin, yeah, it's probably the main thing in the skin is probably stimulating the fibroblasts to produce elastin and collagen. So fine lines and wrinkles sort of disappear. It has a sort of biphasic effect on pigment. So, if you have vitiligo, white patches, it will help that. But also, if you have pigmented spots, it'll help those.
Mm.
So that's sort of interesting. You can use it either way for pigmentary changes. Um, to protect the skin against sunburn, that's been shown many times. I'm not sure that the effects in skin are huge because in general you use these LED face masks.
Mhm.
And it's a real effect. You see before and after pictures. I wouldn't say that it's dramatic. I think the effects, as you say, on cancer therapy side effects, and the big one there is oral mucositis. That's been shown many times. And now they have like an LED device you can put inside your mouth, like a popsicle. And that's probably the best way to get the light inside the mouth to prevent mucositis. And if you start using the device before you start the chemotherapy or the radiotherapy, it'll never develop at all.
Wow.
So if you wait until you've got it, well, okay, it'll help, but it's much better to start using the light device before it starts.
Interesting.
Very likely to prevent it. And the same applies to things like radiation dermatitis or um, chemotherapy induced hair loss and peripheral neuropathy in the hands and feet. These are all cancer therapy side effects that can be helped by photobiomodulation.
Interesting. And
Uh,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
you're saying the effect on cancer itself is a little bit up in the air. Um, there have been a few animal studies that suggest it could have an anti-tumor effect, but other people have tried to show it could stimulate the growth of tumors. This is shining the light directly on a tumor in an animal model. So that's a little bit up in the air. And people say that you should not shine the light directly on a cancer site in a human, just in case you happen to stimulate the growth of some remaining cancer cells.
Hmm, I see. And with regards to fat loss, I know, I live in the United States and people are wild for the latest and greatest, whatever it is. And so a lot of people are using it for fat loss. And I was trying to understand the mechanism. Is it that when you shine the light, are the fatty acids pulled out and then they move into the bloodstream and then you can ultimately work their
Yeah,
way out of the system?
yeah, there's two theories. One is that the actual fat cells themselves, the big swollen fat cells, can be permeabilized and the triglycerides can come out. But a second theory is there's actually a specific enzyme, a lipase, which can be activated by signaling that happens after light absorption. In that case, the lipase would cleave the triglycerides into free fatty acids. So if you take blood samples, you can tell the difference, see whether you've got triglycerides in the blood or free fatty acids in the blood. But in my opinion, the big benefit of photobiomodulation is in combination with exercise.
Mm.
So because photobiomodulation stimulates the mitochondria in the muscles, if you put the light on large muscle groups, they will burn up fat much better when combined with exercise. So it kind of G's up the benefits of exercise
Interesting. So, would you suggest that people do light therapy then before exercise?
before and after, or even during. I did see a picture of an exercise bicycle that was fitted with near infrared lamps all over it. You could sit on the exercise bicycle and get near infrared light from all these LED arrays. So people have done that.
That's amazing. And then does the same apply for weightlifting as well? Because I know that infrared light has an anti-inflammatory benefit. So would you use it after weightlifting or before as well?
Yeah, the Brazilians have done quite a lot of work with athletic performance. And I think the consensus in that you should use photobiomodulation both before and after. Certainly afterwards, it reduces, delayed onset muscle soreness and, you certainly shortens recovery significantly. If you use the light before the exercise, say 3 hours before, then you will see improvements in performance. Maybe not huge improvements, but measurable improvements in performance.
Interesting. Are any countries just at the Olympic level, perhaps, before you're going to run a 100-yard dash? Are they?
Certainly, I mean the Olympic Association said that photobiomodulation is not any kind of doping, so it's not going to be outlawed as some kind of light doping. So I think a lot of sports teams have photobiomodulation devices. Sometimes they're whole body light beds, sometimes they're sort of wrap around sheets of LEDs.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, I'm sure as soon as people read the research and understand the research, that these professional teams, whether it be football, baseball, soccer, whatever, will definitely get on board because they.
Right. As you said, there's also interest from American football teams because of the head injuries, the concussions. So um, certainly some of the football teams have been talking about using LED helmets.
Interesting. Interesting. And what are you seeing as far as photobiomodulation positive effects in chronic disease like Hashimoto's thyroiditis and these inflammatory diseases?
Right. So I think the Brazilians have done um, studies on thyroiditis where it seems to work quite well.
Mm.
Um, for some reason, shining light on the thyroid was given as a contraindication, but I see no reason for that. If you have inflammation in the thyroid, it will help. If you have an underactive thyroid, it could help as well. So it could help both ways.
Interesting. And on wound infections as well?
Wound healing,
Wound healing.
yeah, chronic wound healing is, you know, again, it's difficult to do large trials, but all the studies where people have done it on a small scale, it takes a while. If you have a non-healing leg ulcer, you need to put the LED on it every day for, a few weeks. But it heals up, and you see lots of, series of images of this wound just getting smaller and smaller until eventually it's healed after a month or so.
Wow.
But
And
some of these wounds have been there for 6 months without any change at all before the light.
interesting. And then you see profound changes. And is this light being applied once a day, twice a day?
Yeah, once or twice a day.
And then people talk about joules and millivolts of light. Is there any risk? Can you ever do too much light?
Oh, not in humans. I mean, provided your device doesn't make the tissue uncomfortably hot. With some of these class 4 lasers, that was a risk. They had to keep moving the laser spot around, or else it would have burnt the skin. But with LEDs, you never generally get too hot at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the biphasic dose response, that intrigues people. It's relatively easy to show it in the laboratory and with cell culture and with mouse experiments. But with humans, you very rarely see any evidence, probably because humans are a lot bigger than mice and rats.
Mm-hmm.
So it's difficult to overwhelm them with light in the same way you could a mouse.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Can you explain what the biphasic response is, just for people that may not understand that?
Well, the idea is that certainly in cell culture, um, if you say shine, you go 10 times each time, right? So you've got maybe, let's say, 1, 10, 100, and 1,000 of some. I'm not saying they're joules, but of something anyway. You probably find that, say, the 1 doesn't do anything, the 10 gives you a good result, the 100 gives you a good result, but the 1,000 doesn't at all. It may even give you a bad result. They make things worse. But as I said, these are not close together, these different doses, right? Each one is 10 times the next.
Right. I see.
So in humans, I think it's very difficult to get to the upper end where you start to lose the benefits and even do any damage. As I say, because, as I said, there's a natural fail-safe in humans, which it gets too hot. And people are not going to sit there while you kind of heat them up with a laser or a light source. They're going to go, ouch, that's too hot. So provided you don't make things too hot, you're almost certainly not going to do any damage.
Mm-hmm. And so what is happening, and obviously my listeners are not postdocs like the one you're teaching every day, but at the cellular level, at the mitochondrial level, why is it that red and infrared make a difference? Is that they penetrate tissue, or what makes them special?
Yeah, I mean, all wavelengths of light will do something. So, blue and green light will do something, but as you say, they don't penetrate into tissue well. So people like red light. But funnily enough, there's a gap between red and near infrared, which is in the sort of 700 nanometer range, where the light doesn't seem to do much. So it's not like all light works. Red light, 650, that works fine. Near infrared, 800, 900, that works fine. And even longer wavelengths, 1070 nanometers works fine. 980 nanometers is an interesting wavelength because although it works fine, you've got to be careful with it. It's one of the wavelengths where you might be able to use too much of it.
Interesting. And the blue and green, the blue doesn't penetrate, the blue is touching the opsins, right? Because I talk about melanopsins and is
Yeah, I mean, the opsins are connected to ion channels, TRPV ion channels. So The ion channels have two chromophores. One, as you say, is a blue-green, which is opsons, and the other is the water, the nanostructured water, which you can hit with 980 or with longer infrared wavelength. Uh, and these ion channels, the thing that's confusing is that the ion channels are actually in the mitochondria. So when you measure it in the cells, it's difficult to distinguish between what you get activating ion channels and what you get activating cytochrome C oxidase and mitochondria. The results are kind of similar.
I see. So one quick question, and this is kind of an everyday. You had mentioned something, or I had written or read something about the effect of red and infrared light on tendon issues, kind of the things that frustrate us, like, tennis elbow and carpal tunnel syndrome. It seems like every woman I am talking to has some kind of wrist something on and is dealing with this.
Yeah, I mean, it works great for sore joints. Yeah, if you have inflammation, whether it's because you've done an injury or some other chronic inflammation, it seems to work great. Yeah.
Okay.
But you need to keep on. I mean, you need to do it every day for a good while.
Okay. So if you have, for example, something like carpal tunnel, for example, what kind of light you can a small red and infrared light that you would put your wrist and hands up to, 1, 2, 3 times a day for
Yeah.
15 minutes?
Yeah, I'm a great believer in sort of wearable things because you get flexible LED arrays now. You can just wrap one around your wrist. It's got a little inbuilt battery that you can charge up with a USB, and the battery will last an hour or two.
Hmm.
So if you're going to wear it for 15, 30 minutes, you don't even have to charge it up each time.
Hmm. So so should the future of medicine, if I'm walking into a hospital in 20 years and for some, we had some, white knight that came in with all the money in the world to give us every clinical trial possible. Is that what medicine should look like in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not claiming that photobiomodulation is going to cure every ill, but it has, you know, reasonable applications in many, many fields. Um, as you say, in hospitals, if you've had surgery, photobiomodulation is going to help you recover quicker. It's going to help you heal the surgical wounds, the inflammation, the if tissue needs to be regenerated, it's going to help all this.
Interesting. And what are you seeing? I mean, you obviously were an associate professor of dermatology at Harvard Medical School for 25 years. Do you feel that young up and coming doctors are more open to this modality, even though it is not, I guess, mainstream?
Probably not, because as I said before, the thing that's drummed into them is that everything has to be evidence based. They hear that, you know, virtually every day. I would think it's kind of drummed into them.
Mhm.
So until proper randomized control trials are published, they will maintain it's not evidence based.
Hmm. Okay. So even though there's thousands upon thousands of peer-reviewed articles, that's just not enough.
Right. And the other thing is these doctors are visited by pharmaceutical reps all the time with the latest, most expensive new drug, that they're not visited by manufacturers of LED devices. They just don't get out there. There's no financial business model for them to do it.
Mhm. So financial outcomes, dictate the incentives of people. And so until photobiomodulation and red and infrared light is a financial windfall for doctors, we probably won't see it too
And
much.
yeah, and for companies, that's the thing.
Right.
Um, Yeah, there are a few companies that are making headway. There's Lumithera with the treatment for blindness, for age-related macular degeneration. They got approval for that, so they're selling their device to ophthalmologists. So this is an office-based device. It's like a slit lamp. So the patient will sit and gaze into this light source. Um, and that, yeah, there's many con- clinical trials being reported. It improves eyesight. It certainly stops, because it's a chronic degenerative disease, so it stops the progression, and you even get more lines of vision. So it does restore some eyesight.
Wow. And what about there was the Vilite, which is kind of an intranasal light. Have you seen any? There's no clinical trials for that as well.
Well, there's a few clinical trials, but not really on the scale that would impress anybody.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I mean, in order to press somebody, you've got to probably have hundreds of patients,
Right.
and you've got to publish it in a major journal.
But you've been published in major journals, so why?
Not so much. When you talk major journal, you're talking things like the Lancet, the New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA,
Right,
these sort of things.
right,
That's that's what all mainstream medicine believes in.
right. Which is so fascinating. So that there's kind of this world of, you know, effective medicine, let's say, that we're seeing, but if it's not in those journals, it's irrelevant
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just something that mainstream medicine is not going to take any notice of
until they can make money off of it.
until if you can think of a good way they can make money off of it. Yeah, they'll take notice.
Oh, that's so sad. That's so sad. Um, so I had one other question too, which is on fertility, uh,
Yeah.
photobiomodulation and fertility. So, we have, I'm sure you have crazy people in the UK, but we have crazy people here. You hear all these stories, men shining lights on their private parts in hopes of generating testosterone. Is this hype or is it real?
Oh, no, I don't think so. No, I'm sure. Whether it's a huge effect, I don't know, but it'll certainly have an effect, yes.
So basically, anywhere where you shine this light is going to impact the mitochondria and help the cell.
Yeah, it will, you know, sort of restore any degeneration. It'll stimulate function so that your bodily systems will work at their best level. And if things need to be restored, regenerated, it will help. And certainly if there's pain and inflammation, it will definitely help.
Interesting. And so photobiomodulation then helps if you already have something, but it's even more helpful if you can anticipate problems. So,
Right. And as you know, everybody's getting older, and as you get older, things don't work at their optimal level.
mhm,
So it's a good idea to use light on various parts of the body as you get older. Yeah.
mhm. So where do you go? I mean, this is just so what are people like you doing in terms of finding the funding you need to tell your story and to talk about how effective this is? What does a Dr. Hamblin do?
Well, I mean, talk to people like you, I suppose. I
Right.
mean, obviously, I've written a lot of stuff, but I wouldn't claim to be influencing the mass market at all. I mean,
Mhm.
um,
But interestingly enough, the mass market will influence this because as soon as, you know, women know they can fight fine lines and wrinkles and people can help with fat loss and you can improve your Parkinson's and your Alzheimer's and your dementia and your TBI and your drug addiction. The list goes on and on. So it just
Sleep is a really big deal. An awful
great.
lot of people have problems with sleep, and photobiomodulation is pretty good at helping you sleep.
And how is that applied?
With a helmet,
Mm.
you know, before you go to bed.
Before you go to bed.
Yeah. So if you wake up in the middle of the night, it puts you back to sleep.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. And so, because I know I've seen studies on melatonin that it isn't just a pineal moment, that we're generating melatonin all day. It's kind of this master antioxidant in the body. So, do you,
Apparently, mitochondria all over the body can generate melatonin. And this is not something I've personally researched, but I think other people have shown that.
and
So
that's,
it's entirely possible that, if you put LED arrays on the muscles are stuffed full of mitochondria. So this is one thing, you see, that the organs that have a lot of mitochondria, such as the muscles, the brain, the heart, the liver, the kidneys, respond very well to light. However, the skin has very few mitochondria. So that's one reason the skin doesn't respond that well to light. I mean, it does, but. And you can tell which organs have a lot of mitochondria because they have a deep color. The skin, okay, it has melanin, but we're not saying that melanin is a chromophore. Um, but Caucasian skin, if you take it off the body, it's colorless because there's no mitochondria in it. Whereas you have a slice of heart or liver, it's dark brown, not because it's full of blood, because it's full of mitochondria.
right? Which is why the brain is dark. That,
It's gray, yeah. So the reason it's not dark brown like the liver, it's got all the um, in the white matter, the myelin. The myelin scatters light. So that's why the brain doesn't look dark brown, it looks gray.
mm. Now, is that why in younger children they respond to photobiomodulation better? I mean, I'm seeing studies about light in autistic kids having great results.
Yeah, I think because young children, their brain is a lot more plastic. So it's much easier to rewire the brain in young children than in old folks.
Hmm.
Um, so one thing I keep thinking people should start thinking about photobiomodulation for is eating disorders, right? So you take anorexia, which kills a lot of people. It's certainly by far the most fatal psychiatric disorder by a long way. And, they try everything to get these folks to eat again. And the reason it's impossible is that their brains have become completely wired the wrong way. So I think that photobiomodulation should be tested in eating disorders.
Mm, that's amazing. Now, how much has it been tested in other psychiatric disorders like let's say alcohol abuse?
No, not so much. As I say, the Fred Schiffer has done the work with opioid addiction. So it could easily be tested for other addictions. Paolo Casano has done quite a lot of work with depression and anxiety, and it works pretty well there. Hasn't really been tested at all in schizophrenia. I think Paolo did one study with bipolar disorder. Um, I think it's worth testing in all sorts of psychiatric disorders, especially major psychoses where there's really, these are lifelong things. At the moment, they just try and keep them in check with drugs. That's not a satisfactory solution. You need to rewire the brain. And if photobiomodulation can help the brain to rewire itself, it's definitely worth trying.
For sure. It's fascinating. And it's sad because you see people struggling with addiction and they're doing their best, they're
Yeah,
detoxifying, they're on
yeah.
lots of drugs, but do they ultimately just they do not have a chance unless they can rewire those
I think that's right. That you need to rewire the brain. And it'll sort of happen over a long time, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that were addicted to drugs in their youth, and eventually they got off them and could lead normal lives. But I'm sure the photobiomodulation would hurry up this process. I'm sure it would.
Hmm. So we just need more money to test it, is the bottom line.
I think you just need more publicity,
Hmm.
because all these people, I'm sure, could buy a device on the internet and use it. It's just nobody has told them, nobody has kind of convinced them. It's just they don't know about it.
Right. So people are going to have their own positive results and then they're going to demand it, I would assume,
I
or
think so, yeah, because these days there are a lot of reviews when you buy a product.
mm,
You give a review on the internet, so it's more likely that people will be able to report the positive benefits than in the old days before the internet.
right? Is there any other area? I mean, I thought it was fascinating what you said about anorexia. Are there any other areas that haven't been studied or recently studied that you are finding fascinating?
I think epilepsy is a good example. So people said, oh, you can't use photobiomodulation in epilepsy. The reason they said that was there was a specific type of epilepsy called photophobic. So people, if they had a certain flashing light, would have an epileptic fit, right? And people were really worried about that. But first of all, that is mediated through the eyes. The flashing light has to go through the eyes to trigger an epileptic fit. And again, is quite rare. So if you put the light on the head and not in the eyes, there's no way that can trigger an epileptic fit. And all the biochemistry suggests it would help, because there's a lot of mitochondrial dysfunction in epilepsy. There's a lot of miswiring of brain pathways. And, there's been a few things in animal models where they've shown it works. So
It's fascinating. And what about for just general, more day-to-day, migraines and eye floaters and things of that nature?
migraine's a really good one. Some of my collaborators just did a study with a mouse model of migraine where the biomodulation worked very well.
And what was we won't get into the dosage, but how often were people using photobiomodulation?
The mice with
Mice, the
migraine.
mice.
Yeah, every 2 days, I think.
Okay.
One session every 2 days. So a lot of people do it every 2 days. Personally, I would do it every day, but it just depends.
Right. And so back to sleep, just because there is this emerging research about kind of this, all body melatonin generation, that it isn't just a pineal gland moment 5 hours after sunset. Given that information, would you be doing a little photobiomodulation? I mean, I'm a big fan of getting outside and connecting with nature, so that is first. But short of that, would it
Look,
be,
I think you want sunlight and bright blue light and whatever in the morning, right?
of
To wake
course,
you up. You need red and near infrared light at night to put you to sleep.
right?
So it depends on the time of day.
Hmm. And so you can't do too much red and infrared light in the evening. Is it confusing to your body from a
I don't
circadian
think
standpoint?
so. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Never have.
And so this would be a helmet. So you're saying, so someone like me, and the biggest complaint I hear when I'm sitting around tables talking to people is I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't go back to sleep. It is
Right?
it's the most aggravating thing. Your brain starts stewing and you can't calm down and you can't get back to sleep. The next day you're groggy and ineffective. So are you saying in the middle of the night to actually put this helmet on?
No, you keep one right by your bed. So if you wake up in the middle of the night, stick it on your head for 10 minutes and you almost certainly go right back off to sleep.
Wow. I might scare my husband in the middle of the night, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, if you have one that's just near infrared, it's not going to flood the room with red light and wake
Right.
everybody up.
And the difference between red and infrared obviously goes deeper than red.
Yeah, that's the theory.
Okay. And so even 10 minutes with this helmet can just kind of lull you back
I
into
think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
amazing.
it's got to have enough power. So you want a few watts of power, say 5 watts or something, 10 watts. But with LEDs, that's not a problem at all.
Okay. 10 watts. Okay. I'm writing that down because
I mean, if each LED is, let's say, 100 milliwatts, which is low power for an LED, then if you had 100 LEDs in the helmet, each 100 milliwatts, that would be 10 watts.
okay.
But you can get 5 watt LEDs.
Okay. Uh, I just wanted to go back to one issue, and it seems to I guess it's kind of the unknown epidemic in this country, which is that we are having major fertility issues in both women and men. And you had commented that, most of the mitochondria are contained in our big organs like the brain and the heart. And I know in women, the ovaries as well.
Oh,
Do
yeah.
you do you have any studies on photobiomodulation on, a lot of women are suffering from PCOS and other, perimenopausal, menopausal symptoms. What
And
do you?
there's been one or two scattered papers, but very scattered. Um, there was one paper I saw where somebody used some kind of photobiomodulation on women who wanted to conceive and actually found that, hang on just half a minute.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, I actually found that few of them got pregnant, a surprising number. It
Wow.
wasn't a very well done study. It was, but people will try it. I'm sure they will.
Right. Well, it definitely is an issue because, so many women are struggling with that in this country. And that would be an extremely exciting proposition if photobiomodulation had an impact.
Also, I mean, it helps. Lots of people have studied sperm in a dish, so definitely red near-infrared light helps sperm to function in a dish. Which again, and that's another thing that people have not really studied yet. For organ transplantation, you take an organ out and you have a certain amount of time to get it into the recipient before the organ starts to degenerate. And the reason the organ degenerates is the mitochondria stop working.
Mm.
So if you can irradiate this organ with red near-infrared light during the time between it being removed and placed in the recipient, you should be able to prolong its function.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Any other interesting applications that are new and exciting?
Um, well, there's a whole area called mitochondrial transplantation. This is where you take mitochondria from one person into another or from one part of the body into another.
Wow.
And it's this mitochondrial transplantation seems to have amazing effects. And people have just started to say, well, you could combine it with photobiomodulation because it obviously depends on the function of the mitochondria you're transplanting.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard of fecal transplants. I know that's different, but
Yeah.
is there an easier, I mean, is that kind of a form of, I mean, if there's I don't know if there's mitochondria in fecal matter, but is there ways that you could kind of change one system from the other? Because I know they do fecal transplants to actually improve the gut microbiome of someone.
So that a lot of people have started to study the effect of photobiomodulation on the gut microbiome. And usually they put the light on the belly
Mhm.
and they think that the light is going, through the skin, through the fat layer, through the wall of the intestines, and interacting with the bacteria. And personally, I do not think this is likely on a tissue optics point of view. I think the reason that this works is that the photobiomodulation is altering the inflammatory milieu of the person. So the light is being absorbed systemically and it is changing the cytokine balance of the person. So that's why the bacteria in the gut change, because the inflammatory milieu has changed. That's just my personal opinion.
Interesting.
But it definitely does affect the composition of the gut microbiome.
Interesting. So the one thing that always fascinates me because, you're talking about this research that you're doing, you have 850 peer-reviewed articles just yourself. But this concept has been around for thousands of years in ancient Egypt. And so, I'm always fascinated by evolution and how we evolve. So we evolved as apes and then we became bipedal and then we lost our fur so that we can absorb this light. It seems pretty foundational, not only to our evolution, but now to our daily health. Tell us a little bit about the history of light, if you don't mind. And I know we're ending on our time here, so I don't want to take too.
So, yeah, so as you say, people have, since prehistoric times, people have exposed themselves to light, the sun, basically, for a whole lot of benefits. And also, throughout most of history, people sat around fires, whether these were sort of campfires or, you know, log fires inside houses. And so the people got exposed to sunlight and also infrared light from fires. Um, until recently, when dermatologists tell you don't go out in the sun, you're going to give yourself skin cancer, and people now have convenient central heating, so there's nobody sits around radiant fires much. They go camping maybe. Um, so and also for 100 years there was this whole movement with heliotherapy. So they built clinics in the mountains where people expose themselves to sunlight. Now the question is, why does it work in the mountains and not at sea level? This is an interesting question. People say, oh, well, there's more UV in the mountains, which is true, that's well known. But it's not the UV that's helping you, in my opinion. I think the reason it works in the mountains is that the mitochondrial metabolism is affected at high altitude by the low oxygen. So you go up in the mountains where the air is thin, your mitochondrial metabolism changes. So that the photobiomodulation, the effects it has on electron transport chains and cytochrome C oxidase, has a bigger effect at low oxygen tensions.
Interesting. So you're optimizing your mitochondria at that altitude.
I believe so. And you're optimizing them to accept light.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, they're not working at peak function up the mountains because there's not so much oxygen, but
Mm.
they can respond to light better.
Interesting. Interesting. And that raises an interesting question too about everybody's N equals one and who responds better to light therapy than
Yep.
others.
Oh, absolutely.
So
And some people don't respond at all and never will.
if you,
Whereas
because of mitochondrial dysfunction.
I don't know. I have no idea. It's probably genetic. There's a whole army of genes probably involved.
Mhm.
I don't think it's because their particular mitochondria are necessarily different or dysfunctional. Um, and some people are like hypersensitive. You said, can you do damage with light? Well, a very few people are like hypersensitive.
Mhm.
And you can tell who these people are because they're sensitive to everything.
Mhm.
They're the ones that don't like bright lights or loud noises, or they
Right.
don't like smells from perfume.
Mhm. Right.
They're sort of sensitive to everything. So they're the ones who will claim that if you shine light on them, it's giving them a headache, it's making them jumpy and jittery, but they're very few. I mean, it's not a common thing.
Mhm. So that would be if your central nervous system was just completely dysregulated.
I,
You're
I guess,
unable.
yeah.
Okay. And so I mean, I'm just from a very basic standpoint. So the the situation you described at high altitude, oxygen had a major impact on how the mitochondria performed. And just at a fundamental level, and if you're just going to go, we're a show of beginners and we're at basic Einstein photoelectric effect E equals MC squared, that you can't do anything with this light unless you have electrons in your body, right, to receive this light at a fundamental level.
Yeah, I have electrons, but the mitochondria.
So heliotherapy, though, in general, is these are the places in Switzerland at high altitudes where people are going to.
Yeah. No, I
Excellent.
mean, you know, before the Second World War, they were very common.
Mm,
Um, they could, generally they cost money to go to these clinics,
right.
but people went for all sorts of conditions.
Mhm.
I guess they got some benefit from going.
I think they are very expensive. That's for sure. That's for sure. I think it might be cheaper to use an LED light at home, but
I certainly think so.
anything else? Is there anything else that if you had, advice for people about how to use light and what the benefits are?
I think people should just do a little bit of searching on the internet and see the array of devices available
Mhm.
because there are hundreds of them.
Mhm.
And after you've spent a few hours searching, you'll get an idea of the power. A lot of companies don't even give the power. They'll generally give the wavelength. A lot of them don't even give the power, but some do, and you'll get a feeling for which ones have got a decent power.
Mhm.
Because the,
And
the
you're saying
optical,
5 watts or 10 watts?
yeah, I mean, if you've got a little handheld device, even 1 or 2 watts might be worth having.
Okay. And that would be kind of an overlay, an LED overlay.
Yeah, if you just had something that you put on a sore elbow or sore wrist, these handheld ones. But flexible wraps are good because most of the light goes into the tissue.
I see. Well, this is fascinating. And just to recap, so there is extensive research. You yourself have over 850 peer-reviewed articles to show the efficacy of red and infrared light, otherwise known as photobiomodulation, and its effect on everything from traumatic brain injury, neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and dementia, psychiatric illnesses, eating disorders, chronic illness like Hashimoto's, wound healing, fat loss, anti-aging for the skin, tendon issues like carpal tunnel, tennis elbow. We can go on and on, migraines, everything. So it's amazing to me, all this research. I hope so much that people will, do their own research, or better yet, kind of use these devices, experience the positive effects of them, and perhaps we can get to a point where we can do some significant clinical trials and make this a way of life instead of just pharmaceuticals as our answer to our ills.
Yeah. So I think the world is moving away from big drug companies and pharmaceuticals because, you know, these companies are always coming out with the latest iteration of a drug, which is more expensive, but not that much different from the previous one. And yeah, they cost tens of billions to get approval for these drugs, and they're just marginally better. And who knows what side effects they have?
Right.
And some these drug leaflets, the side effects are way longer than the actual benefits of the drug.
True. The leaflets are articles in themselves. And it's sad because many people I know that use pharmaceutical drugs, it's kind of a game. You're on a pharmaceutical drug, and then they give you another one to counteract the side effects of the first one, when maybe photobiomodulation would have been a better approach.
Yeah.
All right. Dr. Hamblin, it is an honor to have you on the podcast. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for all the time and research you're putting into such an important topic for our health.
Okay. Thank you for having me, and quite enjoyed it.
Good, good, good. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
And you.
All
Bye
right.
now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.